You know that moment when you wake up and everything feels wrong? That electric sensation that crawls up your spine before your brain even understands why. That's exactly what I felt at 3:15 in the morning when I heard the first thud against my front door. I'd been a light sleeper ever since my wife Margaret passed away 6 years ago. The house we'd built together, the one where we raised our daughter Emily, had become simultaneously my sanctuary and my prison. Every creak of the floorboards carried a memory. Every shadow held a ghost. So when I heard that sound, that deliberate, heavy thud against solid oak, my eyes snapped open immediately. The second thud came harder, more insistent, and then I heard it. The unmistakable bite of steel against wood, the splintering crack that told me someone wasn't knocking. They were trying to get in. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The blue light illuminated my bedroom, casting everything in that eerie, technological glow that somehow makes fear feel even more real. I pulled up my security camera app, the one my son-in-law Derek had insisted I installed just 8 months ago. "You're getting older, Paul," he'd said, with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Emily and I worry about you out here all alone. Let us help you feel safe." The footage loaded on my screen, and my blood turned to ice. There on my front porch, illuminated by the motion sensor light, stood my daughter Emily. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Dark jeans, a black hoodie, and in her hands, gripped with both palms, was a firefighter's axe. The red paint on the handle gleamed under the porch light as she swung it again, and I watched in real time as the blade bit into my door. Beside her, holding what looked like a crowbar, was Derek, my son-in-law of 5 years. The man I'd walked my daughter down the aisle to marry. The man who called me dad and came over every Sunday for dinner. They were trying to break into my house. I sat there in my bed. This had to be some kind of nightmare. Some cruel trick my aging mind was playing on me. But the sound of wood splintering was too real. The notification on my phone showing front door, motion detected, was too real. The way my heart hammered against my ribs was definitely, absolutely real. I should have called 911. That's what any rational person would do. But I couldn't make my fingers work, because this wasn't a stranger. This wasn't some random home invasion. This was my daughter. My Emily, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike. The teenager I'd stayed up all night with when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The bride whose hand I'd placed in Derek's just 5 years ago, believing I was giving her to someone who would protect her, who would love her the way she deserved to be loved. Another swing. Another crack. I could see the door starting to give way. My phone buzzed. A text message. From Emily. "We know you're awake, Dad. We can see your bedroom light on. Just open the door. We need to talk." My bedroom light wasn't on. I was sitting in the dark, illuminated only by my phone, which meant they were lying. Or testing me. Or both. I typed back with trembling fingers. "Emily, what's happening? Why are you doing this?" The reply came instantly. "Open the door and we'll explain everything. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Don't make this harder? My own daughter was taking an axe to my front door at 3 in the morning, and I was the one making things harder? I heard Derek's voice muffled through the door, but clear enough. "The hinges are almost through. 2 more minutes, tops." Emily responded, "Dad's probably calling the cops. We need to move faster." But I hadn't called the cops. I was still sitting there, frozen, trying to understand what universe I'd woken up in where my own child would do this to me. Then Emily said something that changed everything. "Remember? We stick to the story. He's been acting erratic, confused. We were worried about him. We tried calling, but he wouldn't answer. We had no choice but to check on him." Derek laughed. Actually laughed. Dementia is a hell of a thing, isn't it? And suddenly, with terrible, crystalline clarity, I understood they weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to save me. Or rather, they were setting up a scenario where they could claim they were trying to save me. They were building a narrative. A confused elderly widower, erratic behavior, concerned family members forced to take drastic action, my hands stopped shaking. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, pushing out the fear and replacing it with something else entirely. Clarity. I opened my security app and started downloading footage. Every camera angle, every timestamp. I uploaded it all to my cloud storage, then emailed copies to 3 different addresses I'd set up years ago for important documents. I worked quickly but carefully, even as I heard the door starting to truly give way. Then I called 911. 911. What's your emergency? I made my voice shake. It wasn't hard. Someone's breaking into my house. They have an axe. Please help me. I'm so scared. Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you get to a safe location? I'm in my bedroom. I've locked the door. Oh God, I can hear them coming in. Officers are on the way, sir. Stay on the line with me. Can you tell me how many intruders there are? I can't tell. At least 2, maybe more. I paused, listening. The front door had finally given way. I could hear footsteps in my living room. They're inside. They're in my house. Stay where you are, sir. Keep your door locked. Officers are 3 minutes away. Emily's voice rang out from downstairs. Dad! Dad, it's me! It's Emily. Are you okay? The performance had begun. I stayed silent, keeping the 911 operator on the line. I could hear them moving through the house. Derek's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Emily calling out, her voice pitched with what I'm sure she thought sounded like concern. Dad, we've been calling you all night. We were so worried. Your door was open. A lie. I heard them break it down. We thought something might have happened to you. I waited until they were right outside my bedroom door before I spoke. I've called the police, I said, loud enough for both the 911 operator and my daughter to hear. They're on their way. Silence. A long, terrible silence. Then Derek, Paul, buddy, it's us. It's Derek and Emily. Open the door. We're not going to hurt you, the way he said it. So practiced. So careful. As if he were talking to someone who wasn't quite right in the head. The 911 operator spoke in my ears, sir. Officers are pulling up now. And they were. I could see the flashing lights through my bedroom window. Red and blue painting the walls of the house I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago. What happened next happened fast. I heard the officers enter through the destroyed front door. Heard Derek and Emily's voices change, becoming urgent, explanatory. I unlocked my bedroom door and stepped out to find my daughter in tears. My soon-in-law with his hands up in a placating gesture. And 2 police officers with very confused expressions. This is my father, Emily said immediately, pointing at me. We've been worried about him. He's been acting strange, confused. We came to check on him, and the door was open. That's not true, I said quietly. I have security footage. They broke down my door with an axe. Derek shook his head, his expression one of pained concern. Paul, buddy, you're confused. The door was already damaged. We were worried you'd been robbed or hurt. That's why we came in. One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression, looked at the front door. Then at the axe, which Emily had apparently dropped in the living room when the police arrived. Then at me, double quotes, sir. Do you have that security footage available? I pulled out my phone. Showed them the app. Showed them the timestamp. Showed them my daughter. Clear as day. Taking an axe to a perfectly intact door while my son-in-law kept watch. The color drained from Emily's face. Derek started talking faster. That's not what it looks like. We were checking the door because it looked damaged. We were trying to stop, the officer said. She looked at Emily and Derek with an expression I recognized. Disgust. You have the right to remain silent. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that this was just the beginning. The tip of an iceberg that ran so deep and so dark that I sometimes wish I'd never discovered it at all. But we'll get to that. They arrested Emily and Derek that night on charges of breaking and entering, criminal mischief, attempted burglary. The officers were thorough, professional, and visibly angry on my behalf. One of them, A younger officer with kind eyes told me he had an elderly father too. Told me he was sorry this was happening to me. I spent the rest of the night giving a statement, answering questions, watching as they photographed my destroyed door, bagged the axe as evidence, and tried to understand what would possess a daughter to do this to her own father. I didn't tell them I knew. Not yet. Because I didn't know, not really. I had theories, sure, but I needed to be certain. As the sun came up over the mountains, painting my living room in shades of gold and amber, I sat in the house that suddenly felt foreign and asked myself the only question that mattered. Why? The answer came 3 days later, delivered by a lawyer I didn't know. His name was Mitchell Carrington, and he showed up at my door, my newly repaired door, at 10 in the morning on a Thursday. He was young, maybe with the kind of expensive suit that made it clear he wasn't here on a public defender's budget. "Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "I represent your daughter and son-in-law. I'd like to speak with you about dropping the charges." I didn't invite him in. They broke into my house with an axe. "I understand this looks bad," Carrington said, his tone smooth as butter, "but I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Your daughter and son-in-law are devastated. They were genuinely worried about you. They'd been calling for hours and getting no answer. They feared you might have fallen, had a medical emergency. In their panic, they made a poor decision about how to gain entry to your home." They tried to frame it as me being confused, erratic. I heard them planning their story. Before they knew I was listening, Carrington's smile didn't waver. "Surely you understand how stress can make people say things they don't mean. Emily loves you very much, Mr. Thompson. She's beside herself with guilt over how this has escalated." "Then why didn't she call 911? If she was so worried about my safety, why break down my door instead of calling for emergency services?" For the first time, Carrington's smile slipped. "Just a fraction. I'm not here to debate the details. I'm here to offer you a solution. Drop the charges, and this all goes away. Your family can begin to heal. Emily and Derek are willing to pay for the door repairs, of course, and to ease any financial burden this may have caused you." "How much?" "I'm sorry. How much are they offering to pay me to drop the charges?" Carrington reached into his briefcase and pulled out a check. He showed it to me, but didn't hand it over. $50,000. I looked at that check for a long moment. $50,000. More money than I'd spent in the last 5 years combined. My pension and Social Security covered my needs just fine. I didn't have expensive tastes. Didn't travel much anymore. Didn't need much. "Why?" I asked. "Excuse me? Why would they pay $50,000 to make this go away?" Breaking and entering, especially for first-time offenders with no criminal history and a story about concern for a family member, it wouldn't result in serious jail time. Maybe community service? Probation? A fine? So why pay me $50,000 to drop it? Carrington's expression hardened. "My clients are prepared to be generous. I suggest you take the offer seriously." "Well, think about it," I said. It closed the door in his face. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already started investigating. You don't work as an aerospace engineer for 40 years without learning how to research, how to follow paper trails, how to dig into documents and find the truth buried in fine print. I started with Emily and Derek's finances. It wasn't hard. I was still listed on the bank account I'd opened for Emily when she was 16. The one she'd kept active all these years for reasons I'd never questioned. I technically had access to view the statements, though I'd never used it before. Never had a reason to. What I found made my blood run cold 3 months ago. They'd taken out a $1.2 million life insurance policy on me. I was the insured. Emily and Derek were the beneficiaries. The monthly premiums were being paid from an account I didn't recognize, but the policy documents were crystal clear. If I died, they would receive $1.2 million. But there was a clause. A standard clause in most life insurance policies. If the insured party was deemed mentally incompetent at the time of death, if there was evidence of dementia or Alzheimer's or any cognitive decline that suggested they hadn't understood what they were signing, the policy could be challenged. could potentially be voided, unless there was documentation. Medical records, a paper trail showing that the insured had been evaluated, diagnosed, and deemed competent enough to make their own decisions even while struggling with cognitive decline. I pulled more records. Found that Emily had been taking me to a doctor I'd never met. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a neurologist in the city. Except I'd never been to see Dr. Hendricks. Had never even heard of her. But according to the medical records filed with my insurance company, I'd been seeing her monthly for the past 6 months. The diagnoses were progressive. First, mild cognitive impairment. Then, early-stage Alzheimer's. Then, moderate cognitive decline with episodes of confusion and paranoia. The notes were detailed, specific. They documented conversations I'd never had, behaviors I'd never exhibited, tests I'd never taken. They were also completely fabricated. I sat in my home office, surrounded by printouts and bank statements and insurance documents, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Not my heart. That had already broken the night I watched my daughter swing an axe at my door. This was something else. Something deeper. This was the death of naivety. The final, absolute end of my belief that family meant something sacred. Something unbreakable. My daughter and my son-in-law had been systematically building a case to have me declared incompetent. They'd forged medical records, paid off a doctor, taken out a life insurance policy that would pay out more than $1 million when I died. And that night, when they came to my door with an axe, they'd been setting up the final piece of the puzzle. An elderly man with documented dementia, living alone, who'd become paranoid and confused, who'd locked himself in his bedroom and called the police on his own daughter. His own family members who'd only been trying to help him, it would have worked. If I hadn't had those security cameras, if I hadn't recorded their conversation, if I hadn't been just paranoid enough, just careful enough, just lucky enough to catch them in the act. But now I had evidence. And now I had a choice. I could go to the police, show them everything, press charges for fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, watch my daughter go to prison, watch the family I had left disintegrate completely. Or I could do something else. I thought about Margaret, about what she would want me to do. My wife had been a kind woman, but she'd also been fierce, protective. She wouldn't have forgiven this. But she also wouldn't have wanted me to destroy Emily. Not completely. Despite everything, Emily was still our daughter, so I made a plan. First, I documented everything. Every forged medical record, every fraudulent insurance document, every transaction. I created a file so comprehensive, so detailed, that there would be no room for doubt. I sent copies to 3 different lawyers, with instructions to release the information to the authorities if anything happened to me. If I died suddenly, if I had an accident, if I was declared incompetent and institutionalized, then I called Carrington back. "I'll take the deal," I said. $50,000, and I dropped the charges. But I have some conditions. We met at his office 2 days later. Emily and Derek were there, looking haggard and scared. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed. Derek couldn't meet my gaze. "Dad," Emily started, but I held up my hand. "You don't get to call me that right now," I said quietly. "Right now, we're here for a business transaction. Nothing more." I laid out my terms. They would pay the $50,000. They would also cancel the life insurance policy immediately. They would remove me from all their financial accounts. They would never, ever forge my signature or my medical records again, and they would explain to me why. I needed to hear it from them. Emily broke down crying. Derek stared at the conference table, and slowly, in fits and starts, the truth came out. They were broke. Completely, devastatingly broke. Derek had been day trading with money he didn't have, running up debts he couldn't pay. They'd mortgaged their house twice over, maxed out every credit card. They owed money to people who didn't take kindly to late payments. "We didn't know what else to do," Emily sobbed. "We were going to lose everything. The house, our cars." Derek said he knew a way to fix it. He said you'd understand, that you'd want to help us by killing me. "No," Emily's head snapped up. No, Dad, we weren't going to hurt you. We just needed the money. And you're old, and you're alone, and eventually you're going to die anyway. We just needed to speed up the timeline a little. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. The way she said it, as if she were explaining basic math to a child. You're going to die anyway, so what difference does it make if it happens sooner rather than later? Derek finally spoke up. The plan was to have you declared incompetent. Get conservatorship. Then we could control your assets legally. The life insurance was just a backup. We weren't actually going to. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Unable to admit what they'd been planning. You were going to institutionalize me, I said. Put me in a care facility. Maybe one that wasn't very good. Maybe one where the neglect was plausible. Where an elderly man with dementia might have an accident. Might wander off. Might forget to eat or take his medication. The silence that followed was answer enough. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Tried to find some trace of the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. Used to fall asleep on my chest while we watched Sunday afternoon movies. But all I could see was a stranger. A desperate, broken stranger who'd been willing to destroy me to save herself. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to sign these papers? You're going to agree to every condition I've laid out, and then you're going to leave. You're going to get your financial house in order on your own. You're going to get therapy. You're going to become the kind of people who would never, ever do something like this again. And if we don't? Derek asked. I pulled out a flash drive, set it on the table. Then this goes to the police, the FBI, the State Insurance Commission, every regulatory body I can think of. And you both go to prison for a very long time. They signed. The charges were dropped. The $50,000 was transferred to my account. The life insurance policy was canceled. And Emily and Derek walked out of my life. But I wasn't done. See, I'd been thinking. Really thinking? About the kind of people who could do what they'd done. About the pathology that led a daughter to betray her father so completely. About the desperation that had driven them to such dark places. And I realized something. They needed to understand. Really understand. What they'd done to me. What they'd taken from me. Not just my sense of safety, though they'd certainly destroyed that. But something deeper. They'd taken my faith in family. My belief that blood meant something. That love meant something. So I gave them a gift. The kind of gift that keeps on giving. I hired a forensic accountant. Had them look into Derek's trading accounts. His debts. His financial history. What we found was interesting. Derek wasn't just bad at trading. He was running a scheme. Small scale. Not sophisticated. But definitely illegal. He'd been taking money from friends and family members, promising them returns on investments, and then using new money to pay off old investors. A classic Ponzi scheme. It was sloppy, poorly executed. The kind of thing that would have collapsed on its own eventually. But I helped it along. I contacted every single person Derek had taken money from, provided them with documentation, showed them exactly how they'd been defrauded, and I pointed them toward a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud cases. The lawsuit started within a month. Derek's scheme collapsed publicly, spectacularly. He lost everything. The house, the cars, his reputation. Emily, who'd known about the scheme but hadn't participated directly, lost everything too. Guilt by association. Guilt by marriage. They had to declare bankruptcy. Had to move into a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. Had to get jobs they were wildly overqualified for just to make ends meet. I watched it all from a distance. Tracked their social media accounts. Saw the posts about how unfair life was. How they'd been betrayed by people they trusted. How they were victims of circumstances beyond their control. The irony wasn't lost on me. But here's the thing. I didn't feel good about it. Didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Revenge, I discovered, is a hollow victory. It doesn't heal the wound. It doesn't restore what was lost. It just creates more pain, more damage, more brokenness. 6 months after everything fell apart, I got a letter. From Emily. It was handwritten, 5 pages long, and it started with 2 words. I'm sorry. She didn't make excuses. Didn't try to justify what they'd done. She just apologized. Explained that she'd been so consumed by fear of losing everything that she'd lost sight of what actually mattered. That she'd betrayed the one person who'd always been there for her. That she'd become someone she didn't recognize. She told me she and Derek were separated. That she was in therapy. That she had gotten a job as a teacher's aide and was working on rebuilding her life from the ground up. That she didn't expect forgiveness. Didn't deserve it. But that she needed me to know she understood what she'd done. That she understood who she'd been. And that she was trying. Every single day to become someone better. I read that letter a dozen times. Sat with it for weeks. Didn't respond. Because the truth is, I didn't know if I could forgive her. Didn't know if I wanted to. The wound was too deep, too raw. The trust was too broken. But then I thought about Margaret again. About what she would say if she were here. And I could hear her voice, clear as day. She's still our daughter, Paul. She'll always be our daughter. No matter what she's done. So I wrote back. Didn't say much. Just 3 sentences. I received your letter. I'm glad you're getting help. Maybe someday we can talk. That was 8 months ago. Last week, Emily called, asked if she could come by, said she had something to tell me. I almost said no. Almost hung up. Almost let that door stay closed forever. But I didn't. She came over on a Sunday afternoon. Brought flowers for the garden, the kind Margaret used to love. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea, not saying much of anything. Finally, she spoke. I'm pregnant. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, the hope, the desperate need for me to say something, anything. Congratulations, I said. She started crying. I want to be better. For this baby, I want to be the kind of mother you and Mom were to me. Before I messed everything up, before I became human, I finished. You became human, Emily. Flawed and scared and desperate. Just like everyone else. I almost killed you. You didn't, though. You came close. Closer than you should have. But you didn't. We sat in silence for a while. Watched the sun move across the sky. Listened to the birds. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, I finally said. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again. What you did? It broke something between us. Maybe permanently. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. But I continued, you're still my daughter. And that baby you're carrying is still my grandchild. And maybe we can find a way forward. Not back to what we had. We can't go back. But maybe forward to something new? Something honest. I'd like that, she whispered. We're not there yet. Not even close. Emily comes by once a month now. We have lunch. Talk about small things. The weather. Her job. Her doctor's appointments. We don't talk about Derek. Don't talk about that night. Don't talk about the betrayal. Maybe someday we will. Maybe someday we'll be able to address it fully, honestly, without the walls we've both built up. But not yet. The baby is due in 4 months. Girl. Emily asked if she could use Margaret as the middle name. I said yes. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. If I'm being too forgiving, too soft. If I should have kept Emily out of my life completely, permanently, as punishment for what she tried to do to me. But then I remember something my father told me decades ago. When I was young and angry about some perceived injustice I can't even remember now. He said, Paul, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It doesn't work that way. It was right. I still have the security footage saved. Still have all the documentation. Still have the evidence that could send Emily to prison if I wanted to use it. It's insurance. In a way, protection. A guarantee that she'll never try something like this again. But I don't think she will. I think she's learned her lesson in the hardest way possible. She lost everything. Her marriage. Her money. Her relationship with her father. Her sense of self. And she's building it back, piece by piece. Not the same as it was before. Different. Maybe better. Maybe not. Time will tell. As for me, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I've started volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic engineering principles to high school kids. Staying busy, staying engaged with life. I've also started dating. Nothing serious, just companionship. Coffee dates with a retired librarian named Ruth, who makes me laugh and doesn't ask to. Many questions about why I'm single at 70-3. Life goes on. That's the thing nobody tells you about trauma, about betrayal, about those moments that feel like they're going to destroy you completely. Life goes on. The sun keeps rising. The seasons keep changing. And you keep breathing, keep moving, keep finding reasons to smile. I won't lie and say I've completely healed, that I've moved past what Emily and Derek tried to do. Some nights I still wake up at 3:15 in the morning, heart pounding, convinced I hear footsteps on my porch. Some days I look at my front door and remember the sound of an axe biting into wood. But those moments are getting less frequent. The nightmares are fading. The hypervigilance is easing. I'm learning to trust again. Slowly, carefully, but it's happening. And maybe that's the real revenge in the end. Not the lawsuits or the bankruptcy or watching them lose everything, but this, choosing to heal, choosing to move forward, choosing to not let their betrayal define the rest of my life. They tried to take everything from me. My money, my freedom, my life. But they didn't succeed. I'm still here, still standing, still finding joy in small things, still believing that tomorrow might be better than today. That's the victory they can never take away from me. I think Margaret would be proud. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Really listening. Not just to the dramatic parts, the acts and the betrayal and the revenge, but to the whole thing. The complexity of it. The mesinzas. The lack of a clean, simple ending. Because that's life, isn't it? It's messy. It's complicated. People we love hurt us. We hurt people we love. And somehow, impossibly, we find ways to keep going. If you're going through something similar, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, if your family has broken your heart, if you're struggling to figure out how to move forward after the unthinkably, want you to know something? It gets better. Not all at once. Not quickly. But slowly, gradually, moment by moment, it gets better. You get to choose what comes next. Revenge or forgiveness. Anger or peace. Isolation or connection. Choose carefully. Choose wisely. Choose in a way that you can live with when you look at yourself in the mirror 10 years from now. As for me, I'm choosing to keep that door open. Just a crack. Just enough to let a little light in. Just enough to remember that even broken things can be beautiful. Even shattered relationships can find new forms. I don't know what the future holds for Emily and me. Maybe we'll rebuild something meaningful. Maybe we won't. Maybe that little girl coming in for months will change everything. Maybe she won't. But I'm willing to find out. And maybe that's the bravest thing I've ever done. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or question something about your own life, leave a comment below. Share your own experiences if you feel comfortable. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone in our pain, in our complicated family dynamics, in our journey toward healing, makes all the difference. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, honest stories about the messy reality of human relationships, subscribe to the channel. More coming soon. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you're stronger than you think. Even when, especially when the people you love try to convince you otherwise.